All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the day one of the annual DBE Workshop and Networking Summit. So if you are attending the Life of the project, including WisDOT solicitations and consultant resourcing, then you're in the right place. My name is Kim Lobdell, and I'm the CEO at KL Engineering. And KL Engineering is assisting the DBE office with the coordination of this annual workshop. So just a little housekeeping before we get started. In the chat box, I have listed Rosalind Roberson's email address. If you want to get PDH credits for this, you need to send an email to Rosalind and she'll verify your attendance and then she'll email you a certificate. And also, we are going to be having an evaluation of this session, and the link to that evaluation will also be in the chat box. And we'd really appreciate it if you could fill out that evaluation at the end of our session before you leave for the day. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation or at the end, I ask that you please type them into either the chat box or the question and answer box. And then either Cheryl or I will read the questions towards the end of the session. We do want to let you know that if you have any questions related to the consultant services, even if we didn't address that topic in this presentation today, feel free to ask those. And if Brenda's able to, she will answer those. I'm not making any promises, so they'll try to answer as many questions as they can. And then we'll all, I mentioned the link to the session evaluation, and we ask that you complete that. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters for this session. Our presenters today are Cheryl Simon and Brenda Schoenfeld. Cheryl Simon is the Asset and Project Management Chief in the Bureau of Project Development. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from UW-Platteville and over 32 years of experience with WisDOT, working in various sections, including programming, planning, corridor studies, engineering, automation, and project development, design, and construction. Before coming to the Bureau, she worked as the North Central Region Program Controls Engineer. Cheryl joined the Bureau of Project Development in March of 2021. Brenda is the statewide consultant engineer for the Division of Transportation Systems Development. She is a graduate of UW-Milwaukee with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. Brenda spent 4 years in the consulting industry before joining WisDOT's Southeast region in 1998. She was a project development manager before locating to Rhinelander. After 3 years in beautiful Rhinelander, her family moved to the Madison area. Beautiful, as Dan Grasser would say. Anyway. Brenda was a Southwest Region local program project manager for 3 years before taking the Dane County PDS supervisor position in 2012. So in March of 2021, she joined the Bureau of Project Development. So with that, Brenda will start off the presentation and then turn it over to Cheryl. Thank you.
Okay, so now I have to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Oh, not yet.
Okay, let me go back, see what I did wrong. Oh, I have to hit share twice? Aha. How about there?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We were asked to give a little bit of a background on WisDOT Life of a Project, spending a little part of time on scoping and consultant resourcing. And again, Cheryl Simon, Bureau of Project Development, Asset and Project Management Section Chief, and myself, my title is officially the Statewide Consultant Engineer in the FDM. So as part of scoping and resourcing of a WisDOT project, Cheryl will get into the project concept and project scoping, and then I'll take over in design delivery resourcing, and we'll get a little bit into the consultant solicitations. Then we'll transition into construction delivery resourcing, including the consultant solicitations. I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl, and then I'm going to keep sharing and page through the different screens. Cheryl?
Thank you. All right. So, WisDOT has a comprehensive system for the prosecution of improvement projects, from the initial project concept during programming to awarding the contract to the contractor for construction. We refer to this as the facilities development process. The process encompasses various phases and key elements and milestones as checkpoints in the process. It's based on applying asset management principles through performance based practical design. And it's documented in the FDM, which is the Facilities Development Manual. So, as I refer to FDM through this training session, that's the Facilities Development Manual. By following a consistent process, we build trust and confidence in our relationships with our partners and the public. And it also allows the department the ability to deliver a program that provides quality multimodal transportation facilities in Wisconsin, while at the same time managing resources and optimizing the amount of work that can be done. It's the foundation for consistent decision making throughout the state. Ultimately, this approach will help the department improve the overall system health of the transportation systems we are responsible for. Next slide. So the benefits of the facilities development process, as I already mentioned, includes the consistent process applied statewide. So a project with the same needs will get the same treatment no matter where it's located in the state. This process focuses more effort up front to ensure a better defined scope, schedule, and budget for the project delivery teams defined in a project management plan. The process includes well-defined deliverables, so everyone knows what's required. It provides established checkpoints to ensure everything is getting completed in a timely manner and is tied to measurable performance goals to ensure we are doing what we said we were going to do in the time that we said it would take and for the budget we said it would cost. Next slide. The facilities development process has a narrative and it's outlined in the Facilities Development Manual, as I mentioned. It's in Chapter 3, Section 1, and I do have those links in the presentation. And they are on the Wisconsin DOT website and can be accessed by anyone. Next slide. So attachment 1.1 of the facilities development process is a chart that outlines the process in a pictorial form. It was originally developed for projects in the State Highway Rehabilitation Program, but it really can be used for any of our programs. Next slide. The chart, I'll run through kind of the layout of the chart. It has phase names across the top with phase elements listed down the left-hand side. There are 4 phases, which include project initiation, project definition, project delivery, and project proposal execution. Phase names represent a collection of activities that's being worked on during that phase, and then it has those key elements associated with it. So there are 5 key phase elements listed on the chart, which include life cycles, milestones, deliverables, phase activities, and change management. Each element shows the progression of a project through the process. Next slide. So for this process, life cycle is referring to the WisDOT Financial Integrated Improvement Program System, or FIPS for short. It's an accounting application. So this is an accounting life cycle for each construction project. The life cycle tracks the refinement of the construction estimate and schedule date through the phases, taking a snapshot at each life cycle. Specific performance measures are then tied to those life cycles. Next slide. Milestones are significant points or events that must be accomplished to move through the facilities development process. There are 8 key milestones, including project initiation complete, preliminary scope complete, final scope certification approved, resourcing complete, design study report approved, PS&E submitted, project let, and project award. 6 of those milestones are tied directly to a life cycle snapshot, and 4 of these are what we consider critical points in the process and are the focus of performance measure snapshots that I mentioned before. Project initiation complete at lifecycle 10 signifies when a project is officially programmed. Final scope certification approved at lifecycle 11 snapshot when the project management plan is finalized and an improved scope, schedule, and budget are finalized. The design study report approved at lifecycle 15 is when the design is at a point when the footprint is finalized and all the approvals have been obtained to start real estate acquisition, utility 1078 process, and railroad coordination activities. And this is also the point when the design team can focus more attention on preparing the actual PS&E package. And then there's the completion of the PS&E submitted milestone at lifecycle 20. Next slide. The deliverables listed on the chart are broken into 2 areas: the project management plan elements, which include scope, schedule, and budget, and other phase deliverables. In both areas, the deliverables are higher level work products that are required to be completed before moving to the next phase or accomplishing a milestone. Deliverables listed for a particular phase may have started in a previous phase, but must be completed prior to advancing to the next phase. Next slide. So below the phase deliverables on the chart is a link for what we call the phase activities list. It wasn't possible to identify every task or activity on the chart. A phase activity list was put together. The phase activities are specific to a particular phase, depending on the project's improvement type, scope of work, complexity. The project teams can review the phase activity list as a resource when developing lists of tasks or activities that need to be completed for their project. The list isn't all inclusive, but it's meant more as a guide of tasks or activities to consider when putting together delivery budgets and schedules. The last part of the chart is change management, and change management is a proactive process for tracking and administering changes during the delivery of a project after the approval of the final scope certification. It includes specific policy, procedures, and performance measures for managing changes to the project management plan, the elements of scope, schedule, budget. And the process of change management is first to seek to eliminate, then control, and finally adapt to any proposed changes without going against the departmental goals or negatively impacting our performance measures. Next slide. So today we will walk through the first couple phases of the process, project initiation and project definition. The project initiation phase is the start of the facilities development process, and during this phase, projects are added into the program, and that's done through an analytical selection process using kind of a thematic approach that identifies system need on a highway segment or structures, and it prioritizes it for funding and then eventually creates a project to address that need. Next slide. The project starts at life cycle 00 and then moves to life cycle 10 when the conceptual scope, schedule, and budget are determined. The project initiation complete is the milestone associated with the end of that phase. That's one of those snapshots I talked about earlier. The key deliverables of the project management plan of scope, schedule, budget are initially developed in this phase and are conceptual in nature at this point. The scope developed during this phase defines rough project limits, includes what structure work will be included, and determines the highway improvement type for the work. The schedule set during this phase establishes a program schedule, which is the anticipated fiscal year for the letting of the construction project and the anticipated start date for the project development activities to ensure enough time for the delivery of the necessary components to let and award the project. The construction estimate developed during this phase is typically a cost per mile type estimate with maybe some adjustments for some known add-ons. Next slide. Phase deliverables for the project initiation phase include construction and design IDs being loaded, design IDs submitted for authorization, the improvement strategy being identified, structure work identified, and if it's a connecting highway, we'll be getting the state municipal financial agreement signed for the design delivery costs. Next slide. So that encompasses the project initiation. So we typically think of that as programming. So now we move into the next phase, which is the project definition phase, and that's considered scoping, the scoping phase. So during this phase, existing conditions and known concerns are evaluated to develop the final scope, the and construction schedule and estimate and delivery schedule and budget. This happens in stages with preliminary scope as the starting point, and that's based on the available data, desktop, and maybe a field review might occur, but usually the field review happens later. And we make some assumptions, and then we work towards that final scope. And during the final scope, we'll try to eliminate some of the unknowns, and some of the design work is actually started to allow for a better defined scope, schedule, and budget. Next slide. The project is at life cycle 10 during this phase and moves to life cycle 11 upon completion. The project initiation complete milestone is the beginning of the phase, and preliminary scope complete milestone occurs during the phase. On the chart, it's shown in the midpoint of the project definition phase, but really most of the work occurs between preliminary scope and final scope complete. So at preliminary scope complete, the region should have a good idea of what the scope, schedule, and budget will be, but then there still could be some uncertainty built in because maybe none of the field work has been done yet or very little. And the preliminary scope occurs once the region knows how the project will be resourced and a safety certification has been completed. So those are some of those deliverables that need to be completed before that milestone is considered complete. The overall project definition phase ends with the final scope certification approved milestone. And this includes completing all the necessary certificates and certifications along with the final scope certification, which documents the final scope, delivery and construction let schedules, and delivery and construction budgets. Next slide. The final scope developed during this phase confirms the concept and identifies specific work to be completed on the construction project. Milestone and work breakdown schedules are developed with better details of the level of effort needed to deliver the final project documents for letting. The schedules for let and non-let components are developed. Construction estimates are developed to a major bid item estimate level now, with some contingencies for quantities that aren't calculated or some other factors that maybe we don't have specific estimates for at this time. The non-let estimates are coordinated with the appropriate functional areas to make sure enough money is budgeted for those activities too. The design delivery budget is developed based on the scope and the anticipated level of effort needed to complete the project. Next slide. So the phase deliverables required to develop the preliminary scope include defining the purpose and need, which identifies the roadway and structure, existing conditions and deficiencies, and determines the appropriate highway improvement type with an emphasis on safety, service life, and capacity. Safety plays a significant role in developing that scope and has its own review and safety certification, as I mentioned earlier. The highway improvement type, again, is determined and risk is assessed and documented. Next slide. Phase deliverables during the final scope when the final scope is being developed include assigned pavement design report, bridge or structure certification document, the risk-based environmental scoping template, and includes identifying utility impacts, identifying right-of-way impacts, identifying railroad impacts. We'll be looking to get assigned state municipal financial and maintenance agreements if it's applicable, if there's elements that need that local participation. And then again, documenting known risks. So that risk assessment is something you'll see throughout the process. Next slide. So upon the approval of the final scope certification, the project definition phase is complete. And then the project moves into the project delivery phase and then ultimately to the project proposal execution phase. The project delivery phase typically starts with getting the resources set up for the completion of the project. So if the project will be done by in-house WisDOT staff, this might include balancing your staff workload and coordinating with the staff and when the staff can begin that work. Or it could involve utilizing consultant resources, which is at this point, I'll turn over to Brenda to talk a little bit more about that aspect of resourcing.
Great. Thanks, Cheryl. So yes, after scope, we talk about resourcing, and there's a lot of opportunities and ways that we can address that. So with state projects, after WisDOT completes that scoping, project development kind of moves from our planning group to our PDS group, reviews our resourcing options for completing the design work. So those two options, in-house WisDOT staff or consultant delivery, are where we would need to look and see what our WisDOT staff are working on. And then we use the complexity, location, and schedule to determine what projects we're going to keep internal and what projects we're going to outsource. So complexity, we have to take into the account of developing our staff. We have lots of new staff, and we're always looking for varying complexity to develop their skills. So we need simple projects for our brand new, fresh graduates or new to transportation staff. And then we need to build on their knowledge and provide experience in many different types of projects and increase that complexity as they develop their design skills. So for example, we like to keep a couple simple resurface projects in-house to get our new staff started, different tasks, and get involved in projects in different ways. And then after we get more experience, we like to develop them with different various types of projects and with higher complexity, again, to benefit our staff and their development. So a bridge rehabilitation project, they would work across borders, as in across to the Bureau of Structures, coordinating design teams and across those units and outside of the PDS teams that they're used to working with. And then for an urban resurfacing project, we would have them start some new tasks, some storm sewer and curb ramps, plus it increases their public involvement skills and working outside of the department, working with municipalities and other agents. So our WisDOT staff that are experienced want some challenging projects. So we do have a track of staff that really like design. They continue to want to work on challenging design projects. And we carefully choose the work that keeps our design group challenged and engaged. Example of some complex projects that we've kept for our in-house staff is a couple of segments of the I-41 freeway expansion in the Northeast region and many different complex urban reconstruction projects in different regions. So location is also another thing that we take into account when we decide which projects to keep for our in-house staff. And one of the pieces that we're looking for is engagement. Either it's near the office or it's near their home. And then we would use that location for engagement during construction. We encourage our designers to go out in construction on the projects that they build. And we're trying to develop those designers to have both a construction experience and a design experience. So that helps them become much more well-rounded in project development. And our goal is to develop the staff into future project managers and supervisors. Again, we have lots of staff that are new, and we're trying to give them that well-rounded experience because we have so many opportunities to promote into different positions. The WisDOT project development groups in many regions are combined design and construction. There are some regions or some areas that have specialties for construction or design, but most of our project development groups are both design construction. And many of our project managers are asked to take on projects from both design through construction, and then they need experience in that construction and design role. And it helps develop our management team. It helps develop our group that would do our to be our project development chiefs and supervisors. And schedule is also very important for us when we're deciding which projects to keep for our in-house staff and which projects to send out for outsourcing. Many times we would like to keep a particular project for in-house delivery, but maybe a compressed schedule requires a larger effort than what we have available. And then the short timelines is usually a reason why we would outsource. WisDOT will send projects out when we move things forward. This happens quite a bit when we have changes in funding. So it requires that quick, larger effort than our resources can deliver. Many recent staff promotions and movements have required acquiring consultant resources quickly to keep projects on the schedule they're at. And just an example, the picture here talks about the federal aid obligations and how we get additional funding at the end of a fiscal year. Many times there's some redistribution dollars, and we don't know what those redistribution dollars will be. This past year, we got $55 million in projects that we added into our later November lets. And so moving projects forward opens up holes further back into our programming schedule. And we, again, need to make sure we have a healthy shelf so we can utilize these dollars. So then we get into consultant resourcing. After we decide what we're going to keep in-house, then we send things out for solicitations. So our options for resourcing are discussed in the FDM, Chapter 8, Consultant Services. And when we identify a project that is going to go out, we have a few things that we do for each project before it goes out. We have to define the scope of services. We have to develop an estimate, a consultant contract estimate, and we have to develop and define the selection criteria of once we get interest back, how are we going to select the consultant to do the work. So those three things need to happen anytime we need consultant services. So back in the FDM in section 8.5, the 1.1 talks about the Brooks Act. This is the federal requirement that we use qualification-based selection, QBS. We'll use the initials QBS quite a bit, but at least 3 firms are selected in order of the preference upon qualifications. Then we negotiate with the first firm until we get a fair and reasonable price. The intent of our Brooks Act is that consideration of price within the selection process is not in the public's best interest. So QBS, again, is required for federal funds and is a best practice for state-funded projects. Price is not in the public's best interest. For a good example is in a bridge design. A low-cost design can miss many elements and details that can deliver a project that would cost more to construct and maintain. Services must provide value to the public. And when we have plans that have accuracy, are clear and concise with our contract bidding documents, and they're buildable, we result in lower construction costs. So again, those federal requirements are in 23 CFR 172, and Federal Highways has a consultant resources page that goes into all of the requirements that we use for audit and for construction resourcing. Again, QBS is when we use from using Chapter 16 low bid purchasing rules. State of Wisconsin state statutes say that we need to do low bid purchasing, except Chapter 84 allows it for the engineering services. And when we do a contract, anytime we expend more than $3,000, we must have a formal contract approved by the governor's office. So the governor's office approves every contract over $3,000 that we put forward. And then we also do a cost benefit analysis of $300,000 for anything over $300,000. So we do cost benefit analysis for every contract that is over that amount, and that has to be approved before the contract can be executed. So back to our state statutes, Chapter 84 is the procurement of the engineering services, and Chapter 16 is the procurement that we use for low bid contractor services. And we can use Chapter 16 for other services that we may need that are that we would go with a low bid. So when we're doing Chapter 84, we use Masterworks. So most of the work that I'm involved in is Chapter 84. Anything that's low bid goes through our purchasing section that is in our division of business management. So when we're using consultant resourcing, we advertise most of our work through our website. So what you can do is, if you're not familiar, please go out and check out our website. If you go to Doing Business, Engineers and Consultants, Structures and Road Resources, it takes you to the applications that we and Masterworks is how we're outsourcing most of our work and advertising that work. So Masterworks, if you're not familiar with that, there's tutorial videos, there's a manual, and if you have any questions, please email our mailbox. We would gladly help you with any questions that you have accessing Masterworks. So consultant resourcing is discussed in Chapter 8, again, of the FDM, and we have multiple options for securing consultant services. And Chapter 8 goes through these different options: the sole source, small purchase, our design services, master contracts, and construction. So sole source contracting is very rare. If there's funds, federal funds, it needs Federal Highways approval. It's very hard to justify only one possible provider. And even if there's one of these factors, it doesn't mean that sole source contracting is in our best interest. So again, very rare for us to use this. There would have to be either the uniqueness, there would have to be an emergency, and an inadequate response. One of these three things could put it into that, but there takes a lot of justification for us to say that only one consulting firm or outside firm can do the work. Small purchase is another option that we can use. We like to use it on contracts under $120,000. There's a maximum amount for small purchase, which is $200,000, and there's a contract limit of $250,000. That $250,000 is a federal limit, and it's a hard stop. We have used small purchase for some design work. And again, when we're doing small purchase, we have to have those three elements ahead of time. We have to define the scope, have an estimate, and then we need to have criteria on who we're going to select. Plus, we do a small purchase approval process within the division to allow that work. And anything over $50,000 would need to have approval at our AO level. So it can be used when other contracting methods are not available or not timely. The small purchase contracts, anything over $3 still needs to get the governor's signature. So we still have to do all of the contract documents and get all of the approvals for the contract to be signed and justified through the governor's signature. But it does save us some time in our advertising, because once we have the three deliverables figured out, the scope, the estimate, and the criteria, we can start contacting firms and then select a firm to do the work. So it just kind of helps us with our advertising timeline. State design services are would be for individual projects. These are our normal solicitations that you see in our monthly advertisement. This is recommended option for most of our design services contracting. We use Masterworks for those solicitations. It has the best flexibility for contracting dollar amounts. We can do contracting up to larger dollar amounts by using this process. It's the most open and fair advertising that we can do. It's open to everyone who goes into Masterworks, and if it's a roster project, it'd be everybody on the roster would be able to put in a notice of interest. It takes about 2 months from loading a project to the posted selections. So that's 2 months of that advertisement time. We advertise the information, we request a notice of interest back from consultants, we review those, and then we would take that time and post those selections, and then negotiations can happen. So our current solicitation that's out on our website today is the March solicitation. Our notice of interests are due on Wednesday, March 9th. When we solicit, we put a PDF of our packages on our website. So there's a summary of packages, and the scope of services is there. You can go back and look at other projects. Go back and look at other projects in Masterworks and see more detail. But this is just a quick way for everyone to look and see what is out there and what we're looking to get resources for. So on our page, we also put out our solicitation schedule. So the schedule we keep a couple months in advance. So here we are in March. And so when we advertise a preview, the preview is a 2-week timeline. And then we do the official solicitation, and that also is a 2-week timeline from solicitation date to notice of interest return. So if for some reason we have an emergency project, we might add it at the solicitation date, and we might not use all of the preview time, just to get through that process, advertisement process a little bit faster. But normally every project that's previewed is the same projects at the solicitation. During the solicitation, there's a question and answer opportunity. And today was the deadline, I think. Oh, no, it was February 28th was the deadline for questions due. So we will be posting those answers before the NOIs are returned on March 9th. And then we anticipate posting our selections prior to this date. This would be the latest date we would post those selections by. One of the other ways that we select resources is through master contracts. And in other states, they're also known as on-call contracts. So we utilize these through Masterworks monthly solicitations, but they are for that on-call work. Typically, they're a 24-month contract. We solicited for our full service engineering masters in January, and when we do those every other year, we do interviews through our engineering opportunity days. So our interviews were last week, and we will be posting selections hopefully in a couple weeks. Specialty master contracts are also solicited through Masterworks. Examples of those would be these other types here: the soil borings, in-plant inspections of our girders, some traffic engineering services, and bridge inspection services. And there's many others. We have lots of specialty masters, and those get advertised also. There's quite a few of them this time of year. Usually we advertise those between January and April. We try to have those last for 2 months or 24 months. And when we utilize some of those masters a little bit faster, sometimes we need to resolicit a little bit earlier. So some of these were solicited in January or earlier, just because we needed more funds. So when we do master contracts, there is signed an upper limit of work for each firm. So the contract that goes to the governor for signature is the opportunity to work and do work orders up to the limit. So master contract usage for the group is limited to 80%. What we would do, for an example, is assign each firm a dollar amount. So the examples here, A, B, C, and D. Some firms will have a different amount than the other, depending on what we anticipate to use. Maybe there's a firm that has multiple crews for doing soil borings. We would give them more funding than we would another firm. It has to do with availability, staff experience is how we set those. So it's a recommendation by the project managers for those specialties. And then for the full service masters, we look at the requests from different regions, and the more regions that use masters, the firms that do work in multiple regions would have a higher dollar amount. So our group limit on this example would be 80% of the total sum. So $2 million, $2,080,000. And so we could take firm B and spend all $500,000 on that firm, but then the other firms would have to be spent less so that we keep the group limit at 80%. And a master does not guarantee work, but allows WisDOT to contract with a work order. So the biggest benefit for this contracting is time. Work order approvals are internal to the department. It doesn't require a solicitation period, and it does not need to go to the governor for signature. So that is how the timelines really benefit by having master contracts. Another section in the FDM is the local design section. The concept and scoping, or the programming and scoping, is by the local public agency, the LPA. Application cycles for securing federal funds are put out, and as projects are awarded, they get into this local design process. And when using federal funds, we must follow, so again, defining the scope, developing an estimate, defining selection criteria, and there's rules on the solicitation also. When local public agencies get approved projects, solicit for QBS work if they follow these different options in the FDM. They have to follow these options in the FDM to be considered following the QBS process. And it's very critical that they do this if they want to use federal funds on any portion of the design. One thing that I would really like to talk about is the conflict of interest for consultants. There's quite a bit of information out here in this segment. I really think it's a good idea to go back and review this. There's some information about the consultants under a retainer to act as a municipal engineer may not compete for DOT-related contracts that impact the municipality. So again, this is very important. Please make sure you're aware of that. We also understand that consultants have many different clients. We are not your only client, but if you are aware of a conflict, it is your responsibility to avoid the conflicts and disclose any potential conflicts to WisDOT as it arises. One of the biggest things that I want you all to be aware of too is with this very large infrastructure bill funding program out and the application cycles are out, there are a lot of local LPA agencies that are not used to using federal funds and are not familiar with the process. And number 9 is very critical for everyone out here, that if you're going to be doing any work for the agency on their grant application, you would need to, the firm would need to have been picked through the QBS process to do the application in order to be able to do the design work. So it is very important that the LPAs followed one of these options in order to allow the consultants involved to be funded for the design work. So just don't get yourself excluded from design work. Ask questions if someone asks you to do an application or to do work. Just something for you to be very aware of. So we talked about state project concept, or our programming group, about the project scoping, kind of got into why we do different projects for resourcing design and when we go with consultant services. So after we get consultant services on board, then it's back to the schedule where we go through the full design process. We have resources, we follow the FDM, we develop the plan, specification, and estimates, and we get out that PS&E. Next, I was going to touch on construction resourcing. So construction engineering resourcing starts in May. Regions review the projects they have scheduled for the next calendar year, and in June, our project managers develop scopes of services and contract estimates for outsourcing. We're anticipating posting those solicitation preview around July 8th. And again, this is anticipated. We anticipate NOIs would be due on August 31st. These dates are not final, but that's what we're looking at right now. And our construction interviews would be mid-September. So this is what follows our normal process. And I would think we're going to continue to follow this process unless something big changes. And hopefully this will be how we would be able to resource our 23 construction. So construction interviews are a statewide event, and our resources are needed in all regions. And then after the interviews, our WisDOT regions, they do their selections. The project managers select project leaders to fill the roles they need for consultant work. Then the regions internally resolved conflicts between selections. Different project managers pick the same consultant project leader. So that's the first set of conflicts that gets resolved. Then regions submit their first draft to all the other regions and to central office. And we look for more conflicts and try to identify any other conflicts as they're the same project leader picked by multiple regions. We usually have a few of those every year that we need to resolve. And then consultant services reviews the selections proposed by the regions and reports out to our administrator's office. And administrator's office reviews and approves before we publish. So we kind of do a cursory discussion with them of where we're headed, where we were in the previous year, and where we are now. And what we've seen is significant increase in construction resourcing. So our construction selection.
Brenda, we have about minutes left, so I just wanted to let you know that. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm getting close to the end. 2 more slides. So our construction selections are based on project schedules many months before letting. Many projects can be delayed or canceled, and others are added. So we're doing this so far in advance that we don't have a lot of time or we don't know what we're going to change. And our construction addenda are published regularly as those schedules change. WisDOT is anticipating new fall 2022 projects when the bipartisan infrastructure bill funding is appropriated. We're hoping that happens March 11th. And the construction engineering delivery needs are high and more resources are needed. So we post our selections on our website, and you can see that our addenda gets updated regularly with changes as projects change for the WisDOT. And then consultant resourcing, WisDOT solicitations are restricted to consultants on our roster. So just a reminder that you need to be on our roster for the design engineering and construction engineering. And there's things on our website about how to join our roster. And sub-consultants are not required to register, but you must have a consultant financial report. The CFR is required, or we give you a waiver and we would give you an indirect overhead rate to use for contracting. So all firms must have that prior to executing a contract. And if you're going to do the CFR, you might just want to be on the roster. One last tip, when filling out your NOI, one of the things we would like to see is more specifics on the roles and deliverables that key staff have been doing for you. So it's very important that you give some specifics about what person delivered what piece and what their key role was. So if I could give a tip, that'd be my tip, is to spend a lot of time on specifics in question 3 of our NOIs. And those are our questions. So sorry I took so much time.
No, it was all really good information. I have one question, a couple, but one that I'd like to have you address first in the chat box, because this is helpful for a lot of the DBE firms and the new firms that may be listening to this presentation. So the question says, any suggestions on how to best break into WisDOT design by the DBE design consultant? Without having WisDOT specific design experience, we aren't ranked very high on monthly solicitations. So do you have any ideas or suggestions as to someone without WisDOT experience, how they can move themselves up higher on the list so that they can get a project?
That's a really good question and a tough question to answer. Our consultant selections are, the notice of interest are reviewed by the project managers, and they are looking for, because they're selecting for qualifications, they're looking for people that have that have those roles already, so that they've shown that they understand the pieces to a WisDOT design. So if you can show how you've done that maybe in a different state, or how you've gone through the design process, or how you've helped on a different project in that NOI for those smaller pieces. And then at the engineering opportunity days, that's a really good thing to do.
I guess I'd like to make one other suggestion, because I have been in this role, although it was many years ago. What was suggested to me at the time when we were trying to get selected was to try to be a sub-consultant with a prime, and to gain some WisDOT experience, even if it was on like a specific task, like signing and pavement marking or something. Every little step you can take. So that would be my suggestion to a DBE consultant, is to go to the DBE networking session tomorrow with the prime consultants, and try to get put on a couple people's teams for different things, for minor tasks, and that way you can try to gain some experience and develop some relationships. So, do you want to go over your poll question, Brenda?
Sure. So I put out 2 poll questions, and I'm not sure how to. Did they go out to everybody?
Yeah, it's the construction inspection staff is out. So
okay. So how do I open it and look at it? I have to end the poll?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, 70%. So that's great. So does your firm have construction inspection staff? Okay, so if you have construction inspection staff available, we think we know what projects we're going to add with this infrastructure bill funding. We cannot share that information. It is a lot of work, and it was statewide. So if you have staff available, either support staff, if you have not seen a request for information, we sent it to those who interviewed at the last construction fair. If you have staff and you were not at the construction fair, you would not be able to be prime, but you could be a sub to another consultant. So please reach out to me if you were not at construction fair and you have staff. And then we'll open that other poll. And worked as a prime. So 62% has worked as a prime for WisDOT, and 37% has not. So if you've not worked as a prime, and you know, being a sub is the best way to get work with the DOT in
engineering. Okay. Any other questions that anybody has? I know Keisha or somebody from Prism has not put the link for the evaluation in the poll yet. If we could get them to do that so people could fill out the evaluation. I had one quick question that somebody had asked me prior to here on Cheryl's presentation for this whole scoping process. Are all the regions currently doing this? Or I think I had heard the Southeast region was like taking the lead in it and the others were coming along. Can you give us an update as to who's all doing it, and do you expect it to go statewide and when that'll happen?
Sure. It is already statewide. It's actually, the chart you see that I presented on has been in the FDM, I think, since 2018. So all the regions are following it. Regions may have additional guidance or region-specific procedures that help them get through the different phases, or to deliver the different phase deliverables or reach those milestones. So there may be some region-specific guidance out there. So if you're working in a particular region, you'll want to ask about any region-specific procedures, but the general process that I outlined is statewide. It's used on all state 3R and backbone projects. It can be used as a template for really any of the programs that we administer. And I did throw that answer in the reply too, because I wasn't sure we would get to it, and I really wanted Brenda to be able to answer the consultant related one. So that is out there too.
They do say the survey, so if people could just hang out. So I want to take this time to thank both Cheryl and Brenda for their participation today. You guys did a great job. I mean, we probably could have talked about this for hours and had many questions, but I'm sure there'll be some other forums. But we really do appreciate your time putting together this proposal and trying to help the DBE and the consultant industry out in general as to how we can better serve DOT and what we can do to get selected for projects. So thank you very much and appreciate your time. And if people just want to stay in the session for just a second longer while Janice is looking for the survey link, there it is. So if you would check, click on the survey link and fill it out. It's only a couple questions. It'll take a minute. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it and look forward to seeing as many people as we can on day 2 tomorrow in person. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.